The silence of a sleeping house is a sacred thing. Mine was shattered not by a sound, but by a whisper. Lying there with my eyes closed and my breath even, I listened as my wife of 22 years dismantled our life, one hushed, giddy word at a time over the phone. Every syllable was a betrayal, painting a vivid picture of a secret life I had paid for but was never invited to. My first instinct was a tidal wave of pure, unadulterated rage that threatened to drown me. But as her laughter, a sound I once cherished, echoed in the darkness, a different feeling surfaced, cold, clear, and calculating. I didn't just want to leave, I wanted to burn her secret world to the ground and dance in the ashes. You think you know how this story ends, a messy divorce, a broken man, think again. Because what I uncovered next, and what I planned in the quiet moments that followed, was a reckoning she never saw coming. Before diving in, hit that subscribe button and comment below. Have you ever dealt with betrayal? Let's hear your stories. Part 1, The Hum of a Lie. For the last year, our marriage had existed in a state of low-grade static. It wasn't the loud, crashing interference of a dying signal, but a persistent, almost unnoticeable hum in the background of our lives. I was Mark, 48 years old, a senior project manager at a software firm, a job I'd taken over a riskier startup venture 2 decades ago because it offered stability, a 401k, and the kind of predictable hours a young family needed. It was a sacrifice, one of many, made on the altar of a shared future, a future that now felt like a foreign country. Linda, my wife, was the vibrant center of our universe, or so I'd always believed. At 46, she was still stunning, with a restless energy that had once captivated me. Recently, she'd taken a part-time job managing a chic downtown art gallery after our youngest, Chloe, went off to college. She said it was to combat empty nest syndrome, to have something that was just hers. I supported it completely, proud of her for finding a new passion. I paid for her new wardrobe, the stylish, form-fitting dresses that seemed a little too bold for a quiet suburban life. I didn't question the late nights, chalking them up to gallery events and schmoozing with artists. I was the reliable husband, the bedrock. My role was to provide, to be steady, and in my steadiness I had become invisible. The signs were there, of course. They always are, aren't they? Hindsight illuminates them with the brutal clarity of a crime scene photograph. There was the new perfume, a musky, unisex scent so unlike the light floral she'd worn for years. It clung to her clothes, a ghost of someone else's presence in our home. Then there was her phone, an object that had become a seamless extension of her hand. It was always angled away from me, screened down on the counter and silenced with a speed that felt practiced. She'd laugh at texts, and when I'd ask what was funny, she'd wave a dismissive hand. Oh, just Karen being ridiculous. Karen was her best friend, but the glow on her face wasn't the kind you got from a friend's meme. Our intimacy had changed, too. It had become a perfunctory, scheduled event, lacking the spontaneous fire that had once defined us. In its place was a strange, almost performative passion, as if she were trying to convince one of us, or maybe both, that everything was fine. Sometimes, in the afterglow, she'd look at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. It wasn't love and it wasn't hate, it was something closer to pity, and that, more than anything, was the most chilling sign of all. I was a problem to be managed, a piece of furniture in the house of her life that was comfortable and familiar, but ultimately just in the way. I'd tried to breach the growing chasm between us. I suggested date nights, a weekend getaway to the coast where we'd fallen in love, even marriage counseling. Each suggestion was met with a sigh and a plausible excuse. Mark, the gallery is just taking off, I can't possibly get away. Or, we don't need a shrink to tell us we're just in a slump. All couples go through it. She was an expert at gaslighting, turning my concern into a sign of my own neediness, my own insecurity. She made me feel like the one who was broken, so I did what I always did. I worked harder, I tried to be more attentive, I shouldered the blame. I told myself it was a phase, I was wrong. It wasn't a phase, it was a curtain call. Part 2, The Whisper in the Dark. The discovery came on a Tuesday. It was a day like any other, mundane and predictable, which made the subsequent implosion of my world feel all the more surreal. I'd come home exhausted from a grueling day of budget meetings, my head pounding. Linda was unusually solicitous. "You look terrible, honey," she said, her hand cool on my forehead. Why don't you take one of those sleeping pills Dr. Martin gave you, get a real night's rest? I mumbled my agreement, took the glass of water she offered, and palmed the small blue pill. But as I walked to the bathroom, a flicker of something, defiance maybe, or just plain stubbornness, made me drop it into the toilet and flush. I didn't like the way they made me feel groggy. I went back to the bedroom, made a show of swallowing, and crawled into bed. Within minutes, I was breathing deeply, mimicking the slow, rhythmic cadence of a man deep in medicated slumber. Linda moved around the room, her movements soft, practiced. I heard the click of her jewelry box, the soft rustle of silk. I assumed she was getting ready for bed. I was wrong. After about 20 minutes of silence, when she must have been sure I was completely unconscious, I heard the faint, telltale chime of a FaceTime call connecting. Then her voice, a conspiratorial whisper that sliced through the darkness and into my soul. "Hey, you," she breathed, and the tone was one I hadn't heard directed at me in years. It was intimate, breathless, and laced with a thrill that was utterly foreign to our life together. I remained perfectly still, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to jump up, to confront her, to snatch the phone and see the face of the man who was stealing my life. But a colder, more primal instinct took over, the instinct of a predator, not prey. I needed to listen, I needed to know everything. "No, he's completely out," she giggled, a sound that was both girlish and cruel. "He took one of his little blue pills. He'll be dead to the world until morning." Poor Mark, he works so hard. The condescension in her voice was a physical blow. A man's voice murmured on the other end, too low for me to make out the words, but the cadence was smooth, confident. Linda sighed contentedly. "I miss you too. I can still smell you on my skin from this afternoon." My stomach clenched. This afternoon. I'd gotten a text from her around 3 p.m. saying she was stuck in a tedious inventory meeting at the gallery. It was a lie. A detailed, casual, and utterly devastating lie. "That little place you found was perfect," she continued, her voice dropping lower, becoming more sensual. "So much better than a stuffy hotel." The way the light came through the windows, she trailed off, and I could practically hear her smiling. I lay there feigning sleep while my wife narrated a romantic scene from her affair, painting a picture for her lover in our marital bed, just feet from where I lay. The conversation went on for another 15 minutes, a highlight reel of their secret relationship. She talked about their plans for a weekend trip to a vineyard, using a gallery buying trip as her cover story. She laughed about how oblivious I was, how easy it was to manage me. "He just wants to believe everything is fine," she said, and the casual cruelty of it stole the air from my lungs. It's almost sad. But the final, fatal blow came when he must have asked about us, about our future. "I don't know, Julian," she whispered, and for the first time her voice held a note of something other than excitement. It was a cold, pragmatic calculus. "The timing has to be right. Mark's finances, the house, it's complicated. Leaving him now would be a financial disaster. I just need a little more time to get things in order, but don't worry, my life with him is already over. I'm just waiting for the right moment to tell him." And there it was. I wasn't her husband anymore. I was a line item on a balance sheet, a financial obstacle to be managed before she could move on to her real life. The love, the history, the family we'd built, it was all just a complicated business arrangement she was planning to liquidate. When the call finally ended with whispered, "I love yous," the silence that descended upon the room was heavier, more suffocating than any sound. I lay there for what felt like hours, my eyes wide open in the dark, my mind a churning vortex of rage, grief, and a terrifying, nascent clarity. The man who had fallen asleep, or pretended to, was gone. In his place was someone else entirely, someone who understood that the game had changed and the rules were about to be rewritten. Part 3, The Anatomy of a Ghost. The next morning I woke up before the alarm, a ghost in my own life. The man who had existed for 48 years, the trusting husband, the devoted father, the reliable provider, had been murdered in his bed the night before. I was his replacement, a hollowed-out shell animated by a single, ice-cold purpose. I watched Linda sleep for a moment. In the soft morning light, she looked so peaceful, so innocent. The gentle rise and fall of her chest, the slight smile on her lips, was she dreaming of him? The thought was a fresh stab of the knife. I saw her not as my wife, but as a stranger, a skilled actress who had played the part of a loving partner for months, maybe even years, while her heart and body belonged to another. My mind began to work like a detective, re-examining the crime scene of our marriage. Every memory, every shared moment from the past year was now tainted, viewed through the lens of her betrayal. That business trip to Chicago 6 months ago, the one where she came back glowing, saying she'd secured a new artist for the gallery. The memory, once a source of pride for me, now curdled into a sickening tableau of hotel rooms and lies. The expensive lingerie she'd bought, claiming it was to spice things up for us, I now realized I'd probably only seen it once or twice. Who was its real audience? I felt an almost physical need to retrace her steps, to find the concrete proof I already possessed in my heart. While she was in the shower, her phone lay on the nightstand. A year ago, I wouldn't have dreamed of touching it. It would have been a violation of the sacred trust between us. Now that trust was a joke. My fingers were trembling as I picked it up. Locked, of course. But I was the one who had set up her phone. I knew her patterns. Her password wasn't our anniversary or our daughter's birthday. It was the founding date of the gallery. A place that was just hers. The irony was so thick I could taste it. I swiped it open. There, under the name Julian, was a universe of her betrayal. Texts, photos, call logs. It was all there, a digital monument to my own foolishness. I scrolled, my breath catching in my throat. There were pictures of them at a winery, his arm draped possessively around her, Linda beaming with a carefree joy I hadn't seen in a decade. There were flirtatious, sexually charged messages that made my stomach churn with a toxic cocktail of jealousy and disgust. They talked about me. They called me the warden and Mr. Predictable. They mocked my taste in movies, my love for grilling on the weekends, the very fabric of the stable, comfortable life I had busted my ass to provide for her. My internal turmoil was a raging battle. One part of me, the old Mark, wanted to storm into the bathroom, smash the phone against the wall, and demand answers. I wanted to scream and cry and let the raw, agonizing pain pour out of me. I wanted to ask her why. Why wasn't I enough? What did I do wrong? But the new Mark, the cold, calculating man born in the darkness of the previous night, held me back. He whispered that a premature confrontation was exactly what she'd expect. It would make her the victim. She would cry, she would apologize, she would use the emotional chaos to manipulate the situation, to control the narrative. She had called me predictable. The last thing I would be was predictable. I thought about our past, the good years. I saw us as kids, painting the nursery for our daughter, our hands and faces smudged with pale yellow paint. I remembered holding her in the hospital after a cancer scare, promising her we'd get through it together. Had any of that been real? Or was I just a convenient partner, a stepping stone? The erotic flashbacks were the worst. I recalled nights of genuine passion, moments I had held onto as proof of our connection. Now, my mind superimposed his face over mine, wondering if she was comparing us even then, if my touch was just a pale imitation of his. The thought was a violation, a desecration of my most private memories. I put the phone back on the nightstand exactly as I'd found it, seconds before she walked out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, humming. "Morning, sleepyhead," she said cheerfully, planting a kiss on my cheek. It felt like the kiss of a viper. It took every ounce of my self-control not to recoil. "Morning," I replied, my voice gravelly but steady. "I feel a lot better." "Guess I really needed the sleep." She smiled, a bright, false smile that didn't reach her eyes. "See, I told you so." In that moment, I made a decision. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of an emotional breakdown. I wouldn't give her an easy way out. She had judged my life with her to be over, a mere financial complication. Fine, I would treat it as such. This was no longer a marriage. It was a hostile takeover. And I was about to launch a meticulously planned, devastatingly effective counteroffensive. She wanted a secret life. I'd have one of my own. My secret was that I knew hers, and that secret was going to be my weapon. Part 4, The Mask of Normalcy. The days that followed were the most surreal and demanding performance of my life. I became a method actor in the play of my own marriage, a domestic spy hiding in plain sight. I wore the mask of the oblivious, devoted husband, a role I now despised but knew was essential to my strategy. I made her coffee in the morning, asked about her day at the gallery, and listened with feigned interest as she recounted fabricated stories of demanding artists and tedious paperwork. Each lie she told was another brick in the wall I was building around my heart, another piece of evidence I mentally filed away. The hardest part was the physical affection. When she'd kiss me goodbye, her lips tasting of coffee and deceit, I had to fight the urge to wipe my mouth. When she'd casually touch my arm, I had to suppress a flinch. I had to live a lie to expose hers, and the hypocrisy of it was a bitter pill to swallow each morning. There was a dark, ironic humor in it that I clung to like a life raft. She thought she was the master manipulator, but she was an amateur playing against a professional who had just discovered the game was rigged. One evening, I decided to test the waters, to see how she would react to a gentle probe. We were watching a movie, a thriller about a cheating spouse. "Can you imagine," I said, shaking my head during a tense scene, "living a double life like that, the amount of energy it must take to keep all those lies straight?" I felt her stiffen beside me on the couch. A flicker of panic crossed her face before being replaced by a mask of nonchalance. "It's just a movie, Mark," she said, her tone a little too sharp. "Some people thrive on drama." "It's pathetic, really." She then proceeded to deliver a 5-minute lecture on the importance of honesty and communication in a relationship, a masterclass in gaslighting. She was rewriting the rules of morality in real time to suit her own narrative. It was breathtakingly audacious. She was so convinced of my ignorance that she felt comfortable lecturing me on the very values she was actively trampling. Her defiance only strengthened my resolve. She wasn't a woman who had made a simple mistake. She was a woman who felt entitled to her betrayal, who viewed my trust as a weakness to be exploited. She saw me as a dull, simple man, and that was an insult I could not forgive. It was also my greatest advantage. Her affair made her careless. She'd leave her phone on the coffee table while she went to get a drink, confident I wouldn't dare look. I'd use those precious seconds to quickly scroll through messages, noting times, dates, and locations. I became an expert at reading things upside down from across a room. They had pet names for each other. He was her lion, and she was his firefly. It was so cliché it would have been laughable if it wasn't my life they were destroying. The mask of normalcy allowed me to observe. I noticed she was siphoning small amounts of money from our joint account, explaining them away as gallery expenses. I saw credit card statements for restaurants I'd never been to, for a hotel in a nearby town we'd never visited together. She was building a financial escape route, piece by piece, right under my nose. Her belief in my obliviousness was absolute. It was the foundation of her entire secret life, and I was about to turn it into a sinkhole that would swallow her whole. Part 5, The Architect of Chaos. After a week of living inside the lie, of gathering preliminary intelligence, I knew I couldn't do this alone. My rage was a constant, simmering fire, and I needed a voice of reason to keep it from boiling over prematurely. I needed a strategist. I needed my old college roommate, Dave. Dave wasn't just my friend. He was one of the sharpest, most ruthless divorce attorneys in the state. We'd seen each other through everything: bad grades, worse breakups, and the general chaos of our 20s. While I had chosen the quiet path of corporate stability, Dave had embraced the conflict, building a career on the ruins of other people's marriages. I called him and asked if he was free for a beer. "For you, Mark, always," he said. "Everything okay? You sound different." We met at a dimly lit bar, the kind of place where secrets felt safe. I laid it all out for him: the whispers in the dark, the phone, the lies, the condescension. I told him everything, my voice low and steady, devoid of the hysteria I felt inside. When I finished, Dave was silent for a long moment, slowly rotating his beer glass on its coaster. He finally looked up, his eyes hard. "First of all, I'm sorry, man, truly. This is a special kind of hell." He took a long drink. "Second of all, the old Mark would have confronted her, cried, and ended up with nothing but a bruised ego and half his net worth gone. The new Mark, the one I'm talking to now, I think he's ready to go to war." A grim smile touched my lips. "I am." "Good," Dave said, leaning forward, "because from this moment on, you are no longer a husband. You are an asset manager preparing for a hostile dissolution of a long-term partnership. Emotion is a liability. Information is ammunition. Your objective is to achieve the most favorable outcome for yourself and your future." It was exactly what I needed to hear. He transformed my pain into a plan. We spent the next 2 hours mapping out a strategy. It was cold, clinical, and brilliant. Step one was evidence. Your knowledge is inadmissible without proof, Dave explained. We need to build an ironclad case. He recommended a private investigator, a discreet professional named Costello who was, in Dave's words, a ghost with a telephoto lens. I hated the idea, the sordidness of it, but Dave was firm. This isn't about getting revenge, Mark. This is about protecting yourself. She's already planning to take you to the cleaners. We need to ensure she doesn't have a leg to stand on when it comes to spousal support or division of assets. We need to prove dissipation of marital funds and infidelity. Step two was finance. Dave had me covertly make copies of every financial document I could find. Bank statements, investment portfolios, credit card bills, tax returns from the last 5 years. He instructed me to open a new bank account in my name only and start quietly diverting a portion of my paycheck there. She's building a war chest, he said. You need one too. Step 3 was the most difficult. Continue the charade. You must remain the loving, slightly clueless husband, Dave stressed. The moment she suspects you know, she'll change her patterns, erase her phone, and lawyer up. We need her to stay comfortable. We need her to get careless. I left the bar that night feeling like a different man. The rage was still there, but it was no longer a wild fire. It was a controlled burn, channeled into a clear, methodical purpose. I was no longer just a victim. I was the architect of my wife's downfall. There was a dark, thrilling satisfaction in it. The man she mocked as Mr. Predictable was about to become the most unpredictable and devastating force she had ever encountered. I hired Costello the next day. Part 6, An Unexpected Alliance. Costello, the private investigator, was worth every penny. Within 2 weeks, I had a thick manila envelope filled with the sordid details of Linda's secret life. There were photos of her and Julian kissing outside a trendy bistro, their hands intertwined. Photos of them entering a boutique hotel on a Tuesday afternoon, the same afternoon she was supposedly at a dentist appointment. There were itemized receipts for expensive dinners and weekend getaways, all paid for with a credit card linked to our joint account. Costello had even identified Julian. His full name was Julian Vance, a failed sculptor turned lifestyle consultant who preyed on wealthy, bored women. He was 10 years younger than Linda and had a history of parasitic relationships. Each photograph, each receipt was a fresh twist of the knife, but it was also a piece of armor. The evidence was irrefutable, a cold, hard shield against any lies she might try to spin. The most surprising development, however, came from a source I never expected, Linda's best friend, Karen. Karen and I had always had a politely antagonistic relationship. She was Linda's fiercely loyal confidant, and I was the boring husband who, in her eyes, probably didn't appreciate Linda enough. She was loud, opinionated, and I'd always felt she viewed me with a certain level of disdain. She called me one afternoon asking if I could meet her for coffee. Her voice was strained. I agreed, my mind racing. Was this a trap? Was she running interference for Linda? I met her at a Starbucks far from our usual neighborhood haunts. She looked nervous, wringing her hands around her cup. Mark, she began, avoiding my eyes. I don't know how to say this, and you have every right to tell me to go to hell, but I can't watch this happen anymore. My guard went up. Watch what happened. Linda, she said, finally meeting my gaze. Her eyes were filled with a mixture of pity and disgust. She's not the person I thought she was. She's been lying to me too, about this guy Julian. At first she sold it to me as this empowering little fling, a way to feel alive again. I wasn't proud of it, but I tried to be supportive. A bad friend, I know. She took a shaky breath, but it's not just a fling. She's talking about a future with him. She's been showing me spreadsheets, Mark, spreadsheets, detailing your assets, calculating what she thinks she can get in a divorce. She called you her retirement plan. She laughed about it. The words hit me harder than any of Costello's photos. A retirement plan, that's all I was. The cold fury I'd been carefully nursing threatened to boil over. Karen must have seen the look on my face. I'm so sorry, Mark. But the final straw was when she told me she was planning to claim you were emotionally abusive, to build a case against you, to make you the villain so she could justify everything. That's not just cheating, that's evil. She pushed a piece of paper across the table. It was a printout of an email. Linda had forwarded it to Karen, a gushing message from Julian. At the bottom was his flight confirmation for a trip to Napa in 3 weeks, the same weekend as our 23rd wedding anniversary party, the one Linda had been meticulously planning for months. The trip, she had told me, was a solo gallery retreat to recharge. She was going to leave you a Dear John letter the morning of your anniversary party, Karen whispered, her voice cracking. She thought it would be poetic. Leaving the old life behind on the very day it started, an alliance was formed in that sterile, coffee-scented room. Karen, consumed by guilt and disgusted by her friend's cruelty, agreed to help. She had access to Linda's social calendar, her private conversations. She became my inside source. I wasn't just a spy in my own home anymore. I had a mole deep in the enemy camp. Linda's plan to make me the villain had just given me an avenging angel. Part 7, The Uninvited Guest. Armed with Costello's file and Karen's inside information, I felt a surge of power. I knew the who, what, where, and when. The only piece of the puzzle I hadn't seen up close was the man himself, Julian. I had seen him in grainy telephoto lens pictures, a handsome but generic-looking man. I wanted to size him up, to understand the man who had so thoroughly bewitched my wife. I needed to see what she saw in him, and more importantly, I wanted him to see me. Not as the pathetic, oblivious husband, but as a variable he hadn't accounted for. An opportunity presented itself a few days later. Karen texted me that Linda was meeting Julian for lunch at an outdoor cafe downtown, one of their regular spots. It was time for a chance encounter. I dressed carefully that morning, not in my usual work attire of slacks and a polo shirt, but in a well-fitted dark gray suit I usually reserved for major client presentations. I got a fresh haircut. I wanted to look sharp, successful, and confident, everything they claimed I wasn't. I arrived at the cafe about 10 minutes after they did, my heart pounding a steady, rhythmic beat of adrenaline. I saw them at a corner table, heads close together, laughing. Linda was radiant, animated in a way she never was with me. He was touching her hand, his expression one of rapt adoration. The sight was a dagger to the heart, but I forced the emotion down. I was an actor on a stage. I walked toward the counter, taking a path that would lead me directly past their table. I kept my phone to my ear, pretending to be on an important business call. "No, absolutely not, we can't push the deadline," I said in a firm, commanding voice. "The client is depending on us, make it happen." As I passed their table, I accidentally dropped my leather briefcase. Papers spilled across the floor. "Damn it," I muttered, bending down to collect them, and then I looked up as if noticing them for the first time. My eyes met Linda's, the color drained from her face. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. Panic, pure and undiluted, flashed in her eyes. "Linda, honey, what are you doing here?" I exclaimed with perfect, practiced surprise. I let my eyes drift to Julian, my expression shifting to one of polite curiosity. Julian, to his credit, was smooth. He stood up, extending a hand. "You must be Mark," he said, his voice as slick as his perfectly coiffed hair. "I'm Julian Vance. I've been consulting with Linda on a new installation for the gallery." I shook his hand, my grip firm, meeting his eyes with a steady, unblinking gaze. "Mark Peterson." "A pleasure." I held his gaze for a fraction of a second too long, letting him know that I was seeing more than just a gallery consultant. Linda's told me so much about the exciting new things happening at the gallery. A lie, of course. But it was a perfectly placed barb. Linda was scrambling, her face a mask of forced composure. "Mark, what a surprise. I thought you were in meetings all day." "The last one got cancelled," I said breezily, finishing gathering my papers. "Just grabbing a coffee before I head back." "Well, I don't want to interrupt your consultation." I smiled, a wide, friendly smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Great to finally meet you, Julian." I gave Linda a quick kiss on the forehead, a gesture of ownership, a mark of my territory that I knew would infuriate them both, and walked away. I didn't look back, but I could feel their eyes on me. I had just thrown a grenade into their safe little bubble. I had shown them that their secret world was not as separate from mine as they believed. The predictable husband was off his leash. For the first time, a seed of doubt would be planted in Linda's mind. And for Julian, he had just met the man whose life he was trying to steal, and that man was not the pathetic pushover he had been led to believe. Part 8, setting the stage. The anniversary party was the perfect stage for the final act. It was Linda's brainchild, an elaborate affair to be held in our beautifully landscaped backyard. She had hired caterers, a string quartet, and had sent out dozens of embossed invitations. It was meant to be a celebration of our enduring love, a showcase for all our friends and family of the perfect life we had built. The irony was so profound it was almost beautiful. She was orchestrating a celebration of a marriage she had already terminated in her heart, using my money to do it. It would be her grandest hypocrisy and her public crucifixion. In the 2 weeks leading up to the party, I played my part to perfection. I feigned enthusiasm, helping her choose a caterer and tasting wine pairings. My performance was so convincing that the seed of doubt I'd planted at the cafe seemed to wither. Linda relaxed, falling back into her old patterns of arrogance and condescension, believing our chance encounter had been nothing more than an unlucky coincidence. She was so blinded by her own ego that she couldn't see the storm gathering right in front of her. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, I worked with Dave and Karen to meticulously prepare the checkmate. Dave had drafted the divorce papers, citing adultery and dissipation of marital assets, all backed by Costello's comprehensive file. Karen fed me crucial information. Linda had already bought her plane ticket to Napa with Julian, non-refundable. She had also scheduled a meeting with her own divorce lawyer for the Monday after the party, ready to strike first. My plan for the reveal was simple, elegant, and devastating. I wasn't going to yell or cause a chaotic scene. My revenge would be delivered with the cool precision of a surgeon's scalpel. During the party, there was a planned toast. Traditionally, I would gush about my wonderful wife and our beautiful life together. This year, my toast would be a little different. I spent hours crafting the speech, each word chosen for maximum impact. It would start sentimentally, lulling her and the audience into a sense of warmth and nostalgia. Then it would pivot slowly and deliberately, introducing a thread of doubt before culminating in an undeniable, evidence-backed conclusion. I also prepared a small party favor. I'd created a simple, one-page document. At the top was a lovely photo of Linda and me from our wedding day. Below it, in stark black and white, were 3 key pieces of evidence: a crystal-clear photo of her kissing Julian outside the hotel, a copy of her non-refundable plane ticket to Napa with him for that very weekend, and a snippet from there. Text messages where they referred to me as their retirement plan. I made 50 copies. The night before the party, as I lay in bed next to the woman who had betrayed me, I felt a strange sense of calm. The rage and the grief were still there, but they had been forged into a diamond-hard resolve. She thought she was closing a chapter of her life. She had no idea I was about to slam the book shut in her face. Part 9, the toast of a lifetime. The day of the party was a perfect, sun-drenched Saturday. Our backyard was filled with the murmur of conversation, the clinking of glasses, and the gentle melodies of the string quartet. Friends and family milled about, congratulating us on 23 years of what they believed to be wedded bliss. Linda was in her element, a radiant hostess in an elegant, backless dress, one I was sure Julian had picked out. She floated through the crowd, accepting accolades, her smile a perfect, practiced lie. I moved through the party like a man in a dream, shaking hands, accepting pats on the back, my own smile feeling like a cheap mask. I saw Karen give me a subtle, encouraging nod from across the lawn. Dave was there too, standing near the back, a silent, imposing witness. Finally, the moment came. Linda's father, a kindly, old-fashioned man, tapped his glass for attention. I believe my son-in-law, Mark, would like to say a few words. A hush fell over the crowd. Linda beamed at me, her eyes shining with false adoration, and squeezed my hand. "Don't be too sappy," she whispered, winking. "I'll try my best," I said, my voice steady. I walked to the center of the patio, picking up a glass of champagne. I held it aloft, my eyes scanning the faces of our guests before finally landing on my wife. 23 years, I began, my voice warm and laced with nostalgia. It's a long time. I remember the day I met Linda like it was yesterday. I was a nervous kid with a bad haircut and a dream, and she was, well, she was a supernova. She lit up every room she walked into, and she still does. Linda preened, a small, self-satisfied smile playing on her lips. The crowd murmured appreciatively. "We built a life together," I continued, letting my voice fill with emotion. "A beautiful home, a wonderful daughter, a history. A marriage, like a house, is built on a foundation, and the foundation of any good marriage, we're told, is trust, honesty, loyalty." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. I saw a flicker of unease in Linda's eyes. And I've learned so much from Linda about the importance of planning for the future, about having a retirement plan, so to speak. I looked directly at her now, my smile never wavering. Her own smile faltered. She's taught me that you have to be strategic, that you can't just be predictable. Panic was now blooming in her eyes. The crowd was silent, sensing the shift in tone. So in honor of our 23 years, and in the spirit of the honesty Linda values so much, I wanted to share a few things with all of you, our dearest friends and family. I reached into my suit jacket and pulled out the stack of papers I had prepared. I believe some of you haven't had the chance to meet the man who has become so instrumental in Linda's recent personal growth. His name is Julian Vance. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Linda's face was ashen, a mask of pure horror. He's a lifestyle consultant, I said, my voice dripping with saccharine sweetness as I began to pass the sheets out to the stunned guests. And together, he and Linda have been enjoying all the fruits of this marriage. From romantic lunches, to afternoons at boutique hotels, to planning a very special anniversary trip to Napa. A trip that unfortunately I wasn't invited on. Her father stared at the paper in his hand, his face a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. Her sister began to cry. Karen looked on with grim satisfaction. I let my voice drop to a near whisper, but it carried across the silent yard with perfect, deadly clarity. So I'd like to propose a toast, not to our 23 years of marriage, which we now know was a lie, but to the future. To Linda's future with her retirement plan, Julian, and to my future. A future of honesty, self-respect, and a long overdue and immediate divorce. I looked at Linda, whose face had crumpled into a mask of disbelief and utter humiliation. By the way, Linda, I added as my coup de grace, while you were planning your trip with Julian, my lawyer was busy filing these. You'll be served on Monday. I've already changed the locks. You should probably call your travel partner. Your retirement plan has been officially liquidated. I raised my glass to new beginnings. And I took a long, slow, satisfying sip of champagne as my wife's perfectly curated world burned to the ground around her. Part 10, The Echo of Freedom. The aftermath of the party was exactly what you'd expect. A maelstrom of frantic phone calls, tearful recriminations from her family, and a firestorm of gossip that ripped through our social circle. Linda, utterly humiliated, didn't even try to come home. She went to her sister's, from where she launched a pathetic, short-lived campaign to paint me as a cruel, vindictive monster. But the evidence was too stark, the public nature of the reveal too damning. The narrative was not hers to control. For once I had seized it. The divorce was swift and brutal for her. Armed with Dave's expertise and Costello's file, we demonstrated a clear pattern of infidelity and dissipation of marital assets. Her plans to claim emotional abuse were laughed out of the room. Her affair had torpedoed any claim she had to significant spousal support. She walked away with her personal belongings and a small fraction of what she had so arrogantly assumed was hers. The house, the majority of the savings, the investments, they were secured. My predictability in financial planning had become my salvation. The months that followed were a strange mixture of grief and exhilaration. I mourned the marriage I thought I had, the woman I once loved. There were lonely nights in the too quiet house, moments of profound sadness for the shared history that was now irrevocably tainted. But those moments were increasingly overshadowed by a feeling I hadn't realized I'd been missing for years: freedom. I was the warden or Mr. Predictable anymore. I was just Mark. I started making changes, small at first, then bigger. I sold the big, empty suburban house, a place that felt more like a mausoleum of bad memories than a home. I moved into a sleek, modern condo downtown with a view of the city lights. I started dressing for myself, not for the part of the suburban dad. Most importantly, I quit my stable, soul-crushing job. I took a significant portion of the assets I had protected and used it to finally fund the startup I had abandoned 20 years ago, a small tech firm developing an innovative logistics software. I hired 2 brilliant young coders and we set up shop in a small, rented office. The work was terrifying, exhilarating, and more fulfilling than anything I had done in decades. I was building something that was mine, on my own terms. I reconnected with old friends, went to baseball games, took up hiking. I learned to enjoy my own company again. I found that the silence I once dreaded was now a peaceful, creative space. About a year later, I ran into Karen at a coffee shop. She told me Linda had moved in with Julian, but their passionate affair had quickly fizzled under the harsh glare of reality. Without the thrill of secrecy and the buffer of my income, their relationship devolved into bickering and resentment. Julian, it turned out, wasn't so charming when he had to pay his own bills. The last Karen heard, Linda was working 2 retail jobs to make ends meet, her vibrant energy replaced by a weary bitterness. I felt a brief, fleeting pang of something, not pity exactly, but a sad acknowledgement of the waste. She had torched a comfortable life for a cheap thrill and was left with nothing but ashes. My own life, however, was rising from them. The startup was showing promise, and I felt a sense of purpose I thought I had lost forever. I had learned a hard lesson, that my kindness was not a weakness, and my trust, once broken, should not be given away so freely again. I had been betrayed, yes, but in the end, her betrayal was the catalyst for my liberation. She had tried to end my life story, not realizing she was only ending the first chapter. The rest of the book was mine to write, and I was finally holding the pen. If this story hit home, like and subscribe for more gripping tales of love and betrayal. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Would you forgive or seek revenge? Was Mark's toast at the party the perfect justice or a step too far? I read all the comments, and your stories matter. Check out the next video popping up now for another twist-filled saga.